education, education, education. That might work as a pledge in UK, but it does not work as a pledge in a country where people are dying because they don't have food, they don't have water, they don't have medical resources to actually stay alive. In order to stay alive, you need those things. And in order to be educated, you need to be alive. Mr. Speaker, there is a hierarchy of needs that the opposition side has completely disregarded. You cannot be educated, you do not have the incentive to actually learn anything if your only thought is, where do I get next meal? Where do I get my next cup of water to actually live to see another day? Mr. Speaker, this is the problem we are trying to solve, and we need to solve this problem now. What they don't understand on the opposition side is that we're talking about farmer communities that actually produce their own food because they have no choice. They are not industrialists in any way because their only purpose is to actually see the next day, to have the food to survive for the following day. Now what we see in these cases is that these societies have a lot of children in order to have workforce. But what we are saying is that we can actually help these societies that have these pyramid type of population charts to actually help them when we actually have the resources, no thank you, resources to help the children to stay alive. The less children we have, the less child mortality, the less infant mortality we will have because we are more able to help these children. We are more able to help these people to have healthy workforce when we have less people, when we have more resources to allocate. This is what government side is trying to do today. What they fail to see is that there's a vicious cycle in the status quo. We see that when they have lots of people, they need lots of resources. So they need lots of people, so they need lots of resources. We need to break this cycle and we need to break it now. And even if it means imposing on these people's right to have children, we have to take it. Yes, we acknowledge that if the government has the capability to support you having 2 children, sure, go ahead. But in these cases, we're talking about very poor countries, very economically underdeveloped, socially underdeveloped countries that do not have those chances. So we actually have to break that in this case. So to move on to a few rebuttals. So basically, the DMO just came up and told you US, China, and Brazil have very large populations. First of all, US has a lot of resources. They have a lot more resources than they need. That is why they actually are able to aid these countries to a certain extent, but not to a very high extent. China has a one-child policy, so that's gone already there. And Brazil is struggling to help all its people. They have a constant struggle to actually keep these people alive and is a lot more developed than the countries that we are actually talking about. Brazil is industrialist. We are talking of countries that don't really have much industry. Second of all, I told you already, they don't have a chance to educate themselves. This is a very naive approach from the opening opposition to say we should educate. Yes, it sounds pretty when we are in the first world, when we are in countries that are capable of it. So basically, that also means that when they were talking about how these people can go abroad and study and set up businesses and then bring back these companies to their countries, how, Mr. Speaker? They don't have the food, the money to do that. They do not have the basic survival needs, so they cannot actually do this. Yes, sir.
How do you ensure the development in your paradigm, given that
I am going to tell you that is exactly my extension, economic development of these states. So let's move on to my extension. No, thank you. So basically what we are telling you is that in the status quo, we have very, very scarce resources that are spread out over a very large population. That is not working. We need to have a smaller population so that we can actually help these people stay alive for a longer period of time. We believe that in this case, we have a more effective economy when we are not simply having to put all of our resources into preventing infant and child mortality. Because when we actually are able to help this one child grow up into an adult, that adult will be the productive one in the society. In this case, what we are doing in the status quo, what these countries are now doing, is that they are trying to support so many children that these children do not live to that day because they do not have the requirement, they do not have the needed amount of resources. No, thank you. We actually see that they don't have the requirement of food, they don't have the medicine, which means that is why they have so many children, because they want one of them to actually survive. But if we actually allow only one child, we can actually help that one child, Mr. Speaker, to survive, and we will thus have a more effective society. So what we are telling you is that on the first level, then we will have this very clear climb up towards development. In the first level, we can provide them with food, water, sanitation, medication. These are the basic needs that we need in the world. After we have those basic needs covered, as the Maslow's hierarchy of needs says, once we have those basic necessities, the survival covered, we can actually then discuss industry. Then we can discuss education. But that is only the secondary. Before that, we need to make sure that we have effective people, that we have people that are capable actually of taking advantage of what we can offer. In this case, if we offer education, nobody will take it because that takes away from their livelihood, Mr. Speaker. So basically, also we will have a better workforce, no thank you, because we can actually make sure that the people that are working stay healthier. We will have the adults' welfare also better, because in the status quo, we have to focus on having these young children. We don't have the resources to actually focus on the people that are working. We have to prioritize one or another because we have scarce resources. If we actually pool our resources and allocate them better, we can actually guarantee both the adult working force to be more productive, be more effective, and thus also give more economic growth to the country. When we have actually them being effective and the children be guaranteed to actually, or more guaranteed than they are now, to actually live to be an adult, that effective adult that will then take the place of the adult. They are worried about aging population, but we're talking about populations that are vastly pyramidal in the status quo, where they have lots of children. We don't actually think that there will be this effect because we can actually now provide people with healthcare. We can actually provide people with medicine when we pool our resources in a more better way. We will have more social development because once we can actually provide the basic necessities, Mr. Speaker, we can also have these people think about what makes me happy. When we have a happier population, when we have a self-actualizing population, we can actually have a more effective population because it is scientifically proven that a happier person is a more productive person, which is why we believe that we should actually implement this policy.
Thank you, Member of Government. Member of Opposition, please.
So thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the fundamental assumption coming from the government side is that resources are something that just like down there. But we think it's totally wrong. Resources become resources when we have the manpower to actually exploit it and excavate it, and when we have the money to actually buy those resources from other places, right, Mr. Speaker? And we believe that manpower is the source of money. We see China, see India, because we have loads and loads of people in these countries, MNCs have the incentive to come to these places to create employment opportunities. Well, as a opposition side, what we would like to prove is that how this motion is rather going to damage the economy of these countries and deprive the accessibility to food. And another extension we would like to give is how this is going to infringe the fundamental right of the children, especially the females and the disabled children, how they are going to be killed and suffer. So before we begin, a couple of rebuttals against the entire government bent. So basically, closing government, opening government both mention about how after taking disposal, the government will suddenly gain the capability to distribute the social welfare. But we think that that kind of recognition is totally wrong in the first place, because we think that the source of the poverty in these countries is not only that they have limited amount of resources, it's because the government doesn't have the ability and accountability to redistribute all the food that they have. So as long as we see these countries in Africa, these as officials live in luxurious houses. On the other hand, we see these people lying down on the slum streets, right, Mr. Speaker? In that case, as we say, because the government itself doesn't change into the afterground, we think that that kind of problem of social welfare will never ever be solved by taking this motion. So in my extension, I would like to prove why having MNCs and companies within your country will rather increase the welfare of these people. So that's going to be my extension. So first extension. So the government side's main proposal about today was about how these countries are suffering from scarce resources or so forth, right, Mr. Speaker? Well, firstly, we think that this is, and I would like to prove how the decrease in the population will lead to the decrease in access to food. So firstly, why is it going to occur? But because we think that the access to resources is not mainly about literally having resources in your own country, but it's also about having the money. The money is the most important thing. Please see the case of Japan. We have very much limited amount of land. Korea have limited amount of land, but they have abundant. People are leading happy life, a healthy life, because they have the money to buy food from other countries, right, Mr. Speaker? So that kind of assumption is wrong. And secondly, why is this motion is going to lead to the lack of money? Because we think that the status quo, we think that these Uganda or these African countries are gaining much from having a lot of manpower. Why is that so? Because we think that the only thing that these countries can actually sell to other countries is like CZ has pointed out, because these countries don't have any unique industry, is the manpower, the abundant manpower they have, right, Mr. Speaker? In that case, we think that therefore these countries having multinational companies coming into these places seeking for the cheap labor, right, Mr. Speaker? And this is extremely good, because what does multinational companies do is, firstly, they're going to create infrastructure for these people, right, Mr. Speaker? Because for these multinational companies to conduct their own businesses, they need infrastructure, they need roads, they need clean water, right, Mr. Speaker? And this is trickling down to these people. And secondly, these technological skills are also trickled down, because for the multinational companies to raise good employees, they have to educate these people, right, Mr. Speaker? And in this way, these people gain this power to actually develop their own industry by themselves. And thirdly, we think that the money itself is gained by these people, because they can have at least some amount of wage by having these kind of companies, by being hard to these companies. They now have the money to actually buy food. And if they can buy food, that's the goal of the government side, right, Mr. Speaker? And if they can develop your own industry by these kind of technology, they can now have the money to actually import it to food from other countries, so all the problems are going to be solved. But after taking this proposal, what's going to happen? The multinational companies will never ever come to these countries, because as the government side has conceded, because these countries don't have any unique industry, in that case, there's no incentive for these countries to actually come, because you only have very much few population. That means that you don't have the unique beauty that these developing countries used to have, right, Mr. Speaker? In that case, firstly, no infrastructure are going to be built, because the government is so much corrupted, like the government side has characterized. There's no way to actually build these kind of things. Secondly, that kind of trickle-down effect of technology will never ever happen. Thirdly, people have no way to actually win, because there's no company that actually hire these people. That's extremely damaging, and they will lack the food, they will die tomorrow. So moving on to the second extension about how the children are going to be harmed. So we think that the after-found clear harm is that if these parents are only allowed to have one child, what they will do will be that if they have female or if they have disabled children, in that case they will kill these children, right, Mr. Speaker? Because for these people, having men who have the strong physicality, who have the stronger power to actually do agriculture or do manual labors, are going to be preferred, right, Mr. Speaker? So in order to have another children, what they're going to do is that they're going to kill this female child or disabled child, right, Mr. Speaker? Why is this so quite problematic? Because firstly, because it's the government's duty to do as much as possible to guarantee the fundamental life of these children, right, Mr. Speaker? If we live in a society in which females and disabled are suddenly killed just by being born, that's an extremely problem from the principle of the government. And secondly, because we think that this is going to lead to the disempowerment of the female itself. Why is that so? Because the entire amount of population we have, as a female population we have, is going to be decreased, right, Mr. Speaker? That means that females are going to be minority. That means that there's no incentive for them, no longer have the government have the incentive to listen to the voices of the females, because their power of vote is much lower, right, Mr. Speaker? And moreover, in the community, the females are going to be much minority. In that case, these females are going to be disenfranchised, right, Mr. Speaker? Before we make any point of information.
Given that the government is corrupted, why NMC do have incentive to come in to this country?
So we think this kind of argumentation is ridiculous, because they are profit seekers. They will go to places in which they have the possibility to gain profits. Even that's the very reason they go to Angola and so forth, right, Mr. Speaker? And we think that then therefore we think that that's the problem that we have. The females are going to be marginalized. They no longer have the voices to be reflected upon the community. And thirdly, I would like to make another mechanism, another harm to this case. We think that this motion is going to damage the local community and their own culture. Why is that so? Because in order to sustain culture or religion or rituals, you always need men, several amount of end, right, Mr. Speaker? In that case, these tribes who are living in these kind of countries are going to have less people. They don't not able to conduct the ritual that they used to have, right, Mr. Speaker? And that's totally against the principle of the government, which is to protect their fundamental, like the right to religion. That means that there's going to be less number. Therefore, we think that this motion is firstly is going to deprive people of the access to food itself. Secondly, it's going to kill the females living in these countries. And thirdly, it's going to damage the cultures and religions that these people have. From all these reasons, we're extremely proud to propose.
Thank you, Member of Opposition, Government Leader. Summarize the case of affirmative side and now call on government leader.
Mr. Speaker, what the opposition side is failing to realize is that in order to have more effective means of survival, it's not only about quantity, it's about quality, Mr. Speaker. They are talking about by having a lot of children, so they'll somehow increase the quality of life of a lot of people in that nation, right? However, I believe that is not actually true. They're talking about, before moving on to substantive, I'll first like to the point that was introduced by the opposing opposition. They said that there needs to be an increase in supply of manpower, and that will directly link to the deprivation of female, which I do not buy for several reasons, which I'm going to explain in my sentence. First of all, they talked about the increase in manpower, right? However, I believe it is not the matter of quantity. It is the matter of quality, Mr. Mrs. Speaker. And if they are to talk about education, if we have like 50 people in the classroom, or do you believe that all 50 people will be the beneficiaries of the education that is provided by the government? I do not think so. It is only the people who's going to survive in that 50 classmates, right? In that sense, I believe they are failing to explain their logic of how by having more classmates, it is going to somehow magically increase the effectiveness of their education, Mr. Speaker. Not only that, they talked about multinational companies coming into like developing countries like Somalia, the countries that was introduced by the opening government, right? However, in the case of multinational companies as well, they are looking forward to quality employers, Mr. and Mrs. Speaker, not the quantity of workers, Mr. and Mrs. Speaker. Multinational companies want skilled workers. They do not want like many workers. They want quality skilled workers who can actually be a benefit to that company. And in that sense, they have failed to actually explain to us why these multinational companies will not come if we have lesser people. Second, they have failed to explain to us by having these skilled employers why multinational companies will not benefit from it. Moving on, and also I would like to talk about the 1950s or 1960s Korea. South Korea, after the war, South Korea was also in a very similar status. They were because it was right after 625, the Korean War. They needed a lot of children. They first believed we need a lot of workers. However, it turned out to be that by having a lot of workers, as our member had brought it up, it increased the high child mortality rate. They were not able to provide quality health service for these poor children. They failed to give them food. We have failed to supply them with water. We have failed to supply them with education. That is why we, just like lost generation in Japan, that is why we are saying, we're telling you that these people were not the beneficiaries of that social trend, Mr. Speaker. And that is why in that lost generation in Korea, so many people were jobless. So many people were deprived of that social status, Mr. Speaker. And also moving on to the farmer's point that was brought up by the opening opposition, right? They said somehow by having more child, this child will somehow grow as an adult in like 5 weeks or what. They were gonna magically supply their workforces instantly, right? I believe, as I understood their point, it was somehow very magical. However, that is not the case, Mr. Speaker. We need, as I'm re-emphasizing again and again, we need quality workers. It is not about quantity, it is about quality. Yes, opening.
So the workforce which is necessary for the development is not high quality white collar job, rather the blue collar job, the massive number of blue collar.
Yes, in the case of blue collar as well, Mr. Speaker, we do not want unskilled, unhealthy, inefficient blue workers, blue collar workers. We want efficient, healthy, we want muscular man forces, Mr. Speaker. And under that model, these healthy workers were not going to be produced in the society for the benefit of the society, Mr. Speaker. And I believe in that case, the government, the opposition side is failing to understand the status quo, Mr. Speaker. And moving on to what the member of government has brought about in her speech. She told you that there is going to be an economic development that also correlates to the quality of workers, Mr. Speaker. They have brought up a very good point of how multinational companies are going to invest to like these currently developing nations, right? With however, in that sense, these multinational companies can actually be a way for these quality workers to actually work for their nation, for the benefit of the nation, right? In that case, I believe by having these first level, by providing with less children, right? By first providing them with food, water, sanitation, whatnot, so that they can be healthy. Second of all, we'll give them industry and revenue so they can actually live and they can actually be part of the society. And then we'll give them, when that is all ready and when that is all provided in the society, and when the children has already became the beneficiaries of this change, then we'll provide them with education so they can actually be a quality, a smart member of the society, so they can actually work for the benefit and for the economic development of that society, Mr. Speaker. And that is why I'm telling you that not only about quantity, but it is also about quality of the workforces that we should focus upon in regards, and bearing in mind the fact that we are talking about developing nations which do not have a lot of skilled, a lot of educated workers in the very status quo, Mr. Speaker. So what the government side has told you in this debate, we have told you that by implementing this policy, not only will it produce more quality workers who can actually work for the community, who can actually work for the benefit of the nation in that very status quo, but also we have told you that the government will be able to more effectively distribute the resources, the lacking resources that these deprived nations, economically deprived nations currently have, Mrs. Speaker. And having said that, I'm extremely proud to propose this motion.
Thank you, last speaker of affirmative bench. And now following the last speaker of this debate, opposition whip.
So the consensus in this debate is government has to be beneficial and accountable for every individual within that country. We have to benefit, we have to guarantee their own future, and we are taking policies. The problem on the entire government case is the status quo's problem is people who are suffering from poverty. But we say that poverty is caused by unaccountable government, corrupting government, but on the other hand, they somehow mention access brown, there's a wonderful word. There's strong logic jam. How the food supply will be guaranteed in your paradigm? How the educational supply will be guaranteed in your paradigm? No, out of time. So you just mentioned we can achieve better society, but we say our side of the house, multinational companies are accelerating the mutual bond in the community is more accountable, more beneficial, and much happier society. And we say that kind of premise won't tackled by government with, on that sense, causing government is out of this debate. So I'm going to talk about two things in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the nature of the overpopulation. Is that bad or good in the first place? The second thing I'm going to talk about, no thank you, how this motion damages the fundamental rights of the children and the fundamental rights of the community or people in the local areas to pursue their own identity, to pursue their own religion, and that kind of choices will be hindered because of the unaccountable governmental decision. Firstly, the nature of the overpopulation. No thank you. So, what we have from the open government was general principle, which says people are suffering, government has to do something. And the mechanism is, another status quo rich is dominating some wealth, and after this plan, suddenly that people will be a very, very generous, kind guy and distribute that money to the people. Firstly, we say we couldn't hear any analysis why those people suddenly change their mindset. Of course, they will remain selfish, and of course, they can get prestige by seeing the people suffering around there. In those kind of cultures, won't change in the first place. But secondly, we say that government or corruption can be more unaccountable to the citizens. Why is that so? And the status quo, poor people, local people, as a consensus of this debate, have a lot of manpower. That means they have more votings, more electional influence toward the government. No, thank you. But after from what happened is, government don't have to care about those people because they are not the one who have the power in the local area. They are not the one who have the voting rights. In those instances, government will start to disenfranchise and dismiss those people, compare with the status quo because they don't have to care about those people. They only care about rich people in our own areas. Within that case, will be rather accountable. No, thank you. So closing government somehow restatement without any logic that people will start to be very, very happy. We start to discuss economy. Why is that so? Because they will be suddenly happy. But on this point, as I told you in my first rebuttal, we couldn't hear any analysis how the incentive of those rich people or politicians suddenly change. But secondly, we say because of the lack of supply, no thank you, in the local agricultural community, the supply of the agriculture crops or those kind of things, food, or so forth in that country will suddenly decrease because of lack of number, as just as has conceded. We think that creates more harm to the people, more lack of resources for people, those kind of things for them. But thirdly, we say as a result, that kind of weak country has to be more dependent upon other Western countries, other countries, and they will start to lose more diplomatic powers, which in those cases is problematic. But on the other hand, closing a position, correct to you, accountable actor is MNC, which has strong incentive to come into that country. Why is that so? No, thank you. Firstly, because they know that there is manpower, which will contribute to themselves. But secondly, we say they know that there is a potential that if they will grow up their own manpower, and as a result, those multinational companies have a strong incentive to come to this country and educate those people. And we say that existing multinational company easily trickles down to the people rather than government. Why is that so? Because they need roads, harbor, airport, any kind of transportation to carry out their own business in that area. And of course, they need water to sustain your workers' life. And as the government will explain, they need healthy people. That clearly shows multinational companies have much more stronger incentive compared with government to provide good education, good healthcare, no thank you, or that kind of thing. On these cases, we think they are more accountable than the government, which only dominates their own power in one certain area. But on the other hand, in the local areas, it's more accountable actor comes in, it creates the basis of the independence in that country by giving them the skills to make their own business that's beneficial. But after this, what happened? Not now. We say those multinational companies won't come into those places. Why is that so? Firstly, because of the lack of manpower, the cost itself will increase because there's no such kind of competing manpower system. I mean, it is a very, very first principle, no thank you. But because of the lack of the manpower, the price of each individual will increase as a result. But secondly, we say because they will lose the potential in that countries to look for or to have the manpower because of this policy, even though now they have enough population. After decade, 20 decades, 30 decades, 30 years, those people won't be there. We think as a result of that kind of calculus, multinational company will lose incentive coming to these places. It's more problematic opening.
We can't understand why MSC will actually go to the Zimbabwe or probably Congo. We will think that they were rather more likely to go in Malaysia, where the more basic.
No. You are against the facts. Congo, Angola, or Zimbabwe, any country's multinational companies have a strong incentive to go because it's manpower. You have to know the international relations. So, second case, how damages the fundamental rights of every individual. First, we say in terms of children, children can be disenfranchised, especially minority children. Why is that so? Disabled people, no thank you. Female or older people who cannot be the workforce can be easily disenfranchised, especially in the case you have only one child. You will start to kill in the hidden places. You won't register that person, no thank you, because they cannot be workable for themselves. But moreover, we say because of strong expectation, as according to their logic, only there's one child, you will start having stronger expectation compared with status quo, because this is only one resources, only one wealth you have now. As a result of that kind of strong expectation, that children will start to suffer from more stress from your parents. And if you couldn't do well, that children can be easily abused or easily bullied by the parents as an outlet of the stress. We think as a result, children can be more harmed because of this policy. But secondly, my partner could explain to you, because of the lack of manpower, it will break the community. Why is that so? Because they cannot exercise their own rituals, which requires a lot of manpower. And of course, we say the right to pursue identity, right to have religion is the meaning of their own life. And that meaning of life, when we deprive, if we take this policy, we can hear any justification why we can suddenly, only because of unaccountable government, to deprive that very, very weaker people in that society. We say we have to maintain that kind of community so that they can be self-independent from other cases. So Mr. Chie, what I told you today. Firstly, we told you that overpopulation is not so problematic, but it benefits society as a whole. But secondly, we say this policy will damage the children, which are especially weaker children. But secondly, it will damage the community. And we have no justification to intervene in individual religion, individual beliefs. On these cases, we couldn't hear any solution to that side of the house. That's why we oppose.